So as mentioned before, the Fisher case is still ongoing and a current event. The death of Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia now might change the vote of the Fisher case, because he was actually for Fisher and against affirmative action. So at a minimum, the decision of this court case is delayed. With his death, there is now only 8 on the high court. It was a 5-4 vote. Now it's a 4-4 tie, which means Fisher can lose and the university can use race in admission process. So it would be brought to the lower courts if it's decided this year, and if there's no replacement for Justice Scalia, obviously. So I'm now going to show you a video that I found on YouTube. It was published February 15, 2016. It's about Justice Scalia's death, and it provides some insight as to what's going to happen now because of his death, especially with the case we were just talking about, the Fisher case. I also learned from the video, which you will see, that it is not going to be 8 on the higher court, that it will be 7 because a justice also renounced being part of the case.
A legal case concerning the affirmative action admissions policy at the University of Texas is still before the U.S. Supreme Court.
The suit was brought by Abigail Fisher, who sued the university for using race as a factor in college admissions. This afternoon, I spoke with UT law professor Lino Graglia about the impact the death of Justice Scalia could have on the Fisher case. We have the Fisher case still out there, and what does his death do to this case, do you believe?
Well, you certainly could have been sure that he would have voted in favor of Fisher. That is, he would have voted against affirmative action, against race preference. He was very strong that the Constitution that should not permit the government to deal with people on the basis of race. He was very strong and predictable. But that is also true of Sotomayor, of Ginsburg, of Kagan. That is, there is no way that they're ever going to vote to disallow race preference. That's not going to happen. Scalia and Thomas, you could say the same thing in the other direction.
Well, I believe one of the justices has recused herself from this case.
Yes, Kagan.
So it could come down to a decision ultimately without those two, right?
So now, on this case, it'll be effectively a 7-judge court.
Professor Graglia told me in the Supreme Court 5 justices is a quorum. He says he and Justice Scalia were good friends and predicted his replacement will not be sworn in until after President Obama leaves office.
So now I'd like to give a scenario and ask a question to pose to the class. A white male had a 3.85 GPA and did not get into Rutgers University, but an African American male who had a 3.6 got into Rutgers. In essence, someone who had a higher GPA did not get into his school because of his race and did not fit the diversity quota. Do you find this to be fair? So clearly this is an opinion question, but here are some reasons it would be considered fair. So the pros, or the reasons affirmative action is considered fair, is because it ensures diversity is created and maintained in schools and the workplace. It creates tolerant communities by exposing people to a variety of cultures different from their own. It also gives people an equal playing field. It's especially important for those who are disadvantaged and live in areas where there are not many opportunities to advance. And the last pro that I would say with this kind of reasoning is that it compensates for the fact that some races started late in the race due to many years of oppression in the past, which colleges have used as their reasoning for affirmative action to help level the playing field again. So now that we've reviewed the pros or the reasons why affirmative action is considered fair, I have another question to pose to the class. If schools do continue to use affirmative action, do you feel that it could lead to lowering the standards for grades and qualifications to get into schools? Or do you feel it doesn't impact the overall level of achievement? This is another opinion question, but keep in mind that there is some evidence that the standards can be lowered in the cases we just reviewed, along with quite a few other cons to affirmative action that I'll bring up in the next slide. So the cons, or the reasons affirmative action is deemed unfair and can lead to this lowering standard of achievement, is one, it's reverse discrimination. Past discrimination against minority groups does not justify present discrimination against non-minorities, which is occurring in these affirmative action cases. All people are equal under the laws of the United States, and we need to be reminded of that. In addition, this lowering level of achievement comes from the idea that it's destroying the idea of meritocracy by allowing affirmative action. It puts race as the dominant factor in admissions, and it should be that the best people should be accepted regardless of their race. If they have the qualifications, they should be allowed to go to the school that they want. Another con is that students accepted because of affirmative action are usually not fully ready for the task. It's not good for the university, and it's also not good for the students because it lowers self-esteem. Some more cons to why affirmative action is considered unfair is it reinforces stereotypes and racism. People given a position purely because of affirmative action often aren't qualified. And it also is this perpetuated idea that all people of that race are stupid because if one's not qualified, it is given that other men not qualified, which isn't the case ever really, but that's what it comes off as. And it presupposes that all people of the same skin color are from the lower class and in turn need help, that they need this grid system and extra qualifications to get them into these schools. It also does not guarantee diversity of opinion by having affirmative action. Having people of different races or ethnicities and the same skin color does not mean they will be the same in opinion or even culture. So to wrap up my presentation and what I discussed, there have been quite a few legal cases that put the constitutionality of affirmative action at question, which we have seen. Many colleges do consider race when reviewing applications as long as there is not a point system that clearly puts someone of a favored race at an advantage without considering individual accomplishments, which we also saw. We also discussed that there are pros and cons to affirmative action depending on people's beliefs. And it has been shown that many say that diversity in itself is not a compelling justification for the use of racial preferences. The affirmative action debate is obviously still at large, as we can see with the current event, and that is something that we will see in the future, whether it becomes a valid thing for every college or if it ends up being turned around where colleges cannot use it.